Those who are afraid to ask for help usually wind up needing it. I know you saw that.
Classic quote. Well, let's get started. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. It's an amazing day. We have a legend in the house with us. I'm very, very excited. Long overdue. Father, husband, mentor, teacher. I mean, he has impacted thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives. Truly amazing, truly a man of wisdom, character, and just getting it done. Always going to the next level and truly inspiring myself and so many others to reach and achieve their dreams. Please welcome the legendary Dr. Frazier O'Leary. How are you?
I'm great. After that, I feel lessened. I'll just shrink right now. I'm doing good.
Yeah, thank you again. I want to get started. Can we talk about, where you grew up in Norfolk and kind of what led you to teaching?
Sure. My family moved to Norfolk in 1950 when I was 6 years old from Boston. I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but I probably could tell you all about the first 6 years of my life in 2 sentences. We moved to Norfolk. My father was in the Navy and spent a couple of years in Norfolk, and then he got transferred to Richmond. And we went to Richmond for my 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And then we moved back to Norfolk, and I graduated high school in Norfolk in 1962. And I started at Old Dominion, what was then Old Dominion College. It was the first year that it had become Old Dominion College. And I only went to college to play baseball, period. End of sentence. I didn't go for any other reason. And I did real well for 1 year. And then they sent me a letter saying that my services were no longer needed because I wasn't going to class. And then I went in the Army. And the next year when the team went to Yankee Stadium to play for the NCAA championship for the second time, because we won it my freshman year, I was on my way to Vietnam, and I was in Vietnam for a year, and came back from Vietnam without any scars, mentally or physically, and went to OCS, Officer Candidate School, and became a second lieutenant in the Army. And my first and only tour as an officer was in Arlington, Virginia. So I came to this area, what is now called, I won't say that, those 3 letters, because I don't believe in that part, but I was in Arlington until I got out in 1968 as a captain. And I started college at American University, and then I became a student athlete rather than an athlete who was a student, and graduated in a couple of years from American University and started teaching the week after I graduated in December at Garnet Patterson Junior High School in January of 1971. And I'll stop right there.
Now I have to ask you a question. I came from private school, so I came to Cardozo. I was frightened out of my mind. I thought something was going to happen to me. Here I am. I see this white male amongst all these, minorities teaching. I mean, no fear and just the respect level. How does somebody gain that respect, especially for people who don't look like you, may not be where you're from? Like, how are you able to move people and get people to respect you?
That's an interesting question. My mother, since my father was in the Navy, my mother was really the person that raised the children. I had 2 sisters and a brother. My sister passed the same year that my wife passed, as a matter of fact. And my mother was a church woman, and she was very involved in what was then called the Congregational Church. It's now the United Church of Christ. And that's how she lived her life, that everybody was the same. You treated everybody the same way. And because when I was my 9th grade year in junior high, which was 1959, they closed the schools in Norfolk rather than integrate the schools. So my first semester in the 9th grade, all of the white students in Norfolk went to school in like church basements and places like that. And the black students in Norfolk went to their schools. That's how stupid the whole system was.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know about that part. I knew that, we went, but I didn't know. I thought that everybody in Norfolk went to school in church basements because that's what we did. And then I really learned a lot about that from one of our former principals, Dr. James Williams, who was principal from 1981 to 85, who went to Booker T. Washington High School in Norfolk, which was the black high school in Norfolk. There were 3 white high schools, Granby, Norview, and Maury. And we graduated from high school the same year. And he was a baseball player too. But everything was, when I was in junior high, everything was segregated in Norfolk, except for the world's largest naval base, the Norfolk Naval Base, which was integrated. And since we were a Navy family, we always went to the grocery store at the commissary on base, and we went to the movies on base, and we went to the gyms on base, which were integrated. So my whole time as a integrated white person in Norfolk, or a segregated white person in Norfolk, but we always spent time in the integrated places in Norfolk. It was like an island in Norfolk Naval Base, and because you spent 4 years in Norfolk.
Yes.
The Norfolk Naval Base is huge, and it's got everything you need to survive as a human being. You don't have to really go off the base. We'd go on the base to do this stuff, and so I just wasn't raised to in our house to have any kind of, just to treat everybody the same. But I think that maybe the bottom line might have been that I was an athlete. So that when I was at Garnet-Patterson for 7 years, I was coaching. And, once you get on the floor or on the field and you're playing sports, you can't really hide that you can't play or you can't do this and that. And I was a pretty good athlete. So maybe but then I went to Cardozo, but the year before I went to Cardozo, I was assistant coach on the girls basketball team at Cardozo. So my girls that played for me at Garnet-Patterson went to Cardozo, and the girls on the team that I was coaching at Cardozo knew who I was before I got to Cardozo. But like you said, there were a couple of what I would consider, well, they're not as old as I am now, but they were really old. There weren't any white male teachers at Cardozo when I got there, but there were a handful of female white teachers when I got there. But they were all a lot older than I was. So, but I started coaching. I was assistant coach on the football team in the fall of 1977 when I got there, and I also was the assistant basketball coach of the boys team, and assistant basketball coach for the girls team, and the head baseball coach, all in that first year. So that may have had something to do with it. But as you know, it's not hard to be a disciplinarian.
Right.
Well, you're just supposed to do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And even though I'm easy to get along with, it wasn't easy to make the A that you made. You earned it.
That's true.
I'm talking about you.
Right. That is
because Catherine was one of my best students ever.
Oh, thanks.
Because she was a hard worker and extremely bright, and that's a really good mix.
I want to ask you. I remember very vividly you speaking to everybody about the importance of not paying for college, and as we know, the college debt is through the roof, and with President Biden and people are now trying to give public student loan forgiveness and things like that. Why do you think a lot of people don't take advantage of scholarships? I know you were really pushing that hard until they get into college, and I guess based it off of the college setup, if they can actually like not get in debt.
I think probably what I said when I was talking to your class or any other group of high school seniors was that your parents really love you, but they don't want to pay for college.
Right.
And there's plenty of money out there, but you have to go and ask. When we're talking about that thing that's behind my head, you know, those who are afraid to ask for help usually wind up needing it. You know, when you applied for a multitude of scholarships and probably got all of them, but I mean, there were people that got like, I remember we had a student in the Trans Tech Academy at the time before you named Leon Crow, who was a C student. He applied for every scholarship he could apply for and got like hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships just because he was the only one that, you know, if you're the only one that applies for a scholarship, you're the winner.
Yep.
And so what all students need to understand is there's money out there, especially for minorities. But if you don't ask, you won't get it. They're not banging on your door to give you money because somebody else will get it. So I think that, I still, whenever I'm talking to students in my exalted position as a member of the State Board of Education, always talking to students about, even the students, I'm still teaching at UDC and their freshman classes, and I'm still talking to the freshmen about making sure that because I found out, I didn't know anything about it. I went to college on the GI Bill. I didn't have any other money. I was still working. My daughter was born right before I started college. So I was my wife and I had another child right after I started teaching. But when I started applying for, I went on, I got a fellowship, a grant from the Faulkner Foundation. I started teaching in January of 1971, and I was awarded a fellowship to go to St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico, all expenses paid for my master's. 3 summers, I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico for my master's, and I didn't pay 1 red cent for my master's.
Wow.
And in 89, I applied for a fellowship to work on my PhD and got the second version of the same scholarship that paid for my PhD. So, but you've got to find those things, and you've got to ask people to help you, especially if there are any. I'm probably not, but any high school students watching, go to your counselor should be your best friend in high school. Yeah. Period. That's the person that can really get you all that money that your parents will clap about. Because when they announce at graduation and they start listing those, or the award ceremony, and start listing those scholarships, yep, the loudest applause is the parent in the room. Yeah, that's my baby. They're saying all that, but they're behind it. They're saying, I don't have to pay any college.
Right.
Because those, like my daughter, my oldest daughter, took loans out to get her. She's a doctor of veterinary medicine, and she went to veterinary school, which is really hard to get into. Took her a long time, but she took out loans for that, and she's almost finished paying off her loans now. But this thing that if it's ever passed, it depends on this election coming up, probably whether or not that'll be passed. It'll take a big weight off for her, but you can't count on the government taking away the loans. So you got to, and the loans are great. I mean, you're not paying big bucks for your loans. It's a long time, but it's an investment on yourself.
Right. So I want to talk about your famous quote a man's reach should exceed his grasp. Why did you choose to really hone in on that quote, in and out the classroom?
Well, if you had a picture of it, I started teaching AP with a class that started before school. We called it an 8:00 class, but it really started at 7:45 because I wanted to see my students every day, and we went on to block scheduling and stuff like that. And that's not my quote. That's from a poem called Andrea del Sorto by Robert Browning, and it's not. It continues on. A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or that's what heaven's for. But I've always thought that whole concept of exceeding your grasp is how I've become whatever success. It's because I've tried to exceed what I could do normally, and it just so happened that capital A man's should exceed his grasp, capital P. You got A at the beginning and P at the end, so that's on the slogan. So that I can take credit for that part of it.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Right. So, in 2007, you retired from Cardozo.
No, 2017.
Oh, 17. I'm sorry. 17. You retired. But then I knew everybody's like, Mr. O'Leary, he's not going to, he's going to keep doing something. We just don't know what it is. And then you turn around, you're teaching at UDC, and you ran for State Board of Education and actually won.
With your help.
Yeah. I was out there canvassing for you. Like, what made you want to do that? Because, a lot of people, they retire, and I hear it all the time, they want to lay back, but you continually keep pushing forward and keep pouring into people and just keep giving back. Like, what made you want to run, and then you actually won?
Well, I could give you a fake story and tell you about how, I was inspired by education, blah, 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 blah. My wife was a Head Start teacher, and she was going to retire in 2018. And we were going to spend the rest of our lives together, traveling and doing stuff like that. Our children, everybody's an adult now. And so that was the plan. I didn't have any plan. I was still teaching I've been teaching at UDC now for almost 40 years. And at night, I was doing it before. Now I get to teach during the day. Like I had 2 classes this morning. But she got sick the year before I retired. She was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and went into chemo. She was diagnosed in May and started the chemo at the beginning of July. And then the next year on the Cardozo's graduation, which was the 9th of June, we got a bad CAT scan that said that her cancer had come back. She hadn't recovered, but when she went through the chemo, we were always getting it was getting smaller and stuff like that. But it was stage 4 colon cancer, which for those who don't know means that the cancer spread to four sites. And so she started failing. And she passed a couple of months after I graduated from Cardozo. And I didn't do anything for 6 months at all. I mean, she was the love of my life, and it was hard. But then I started doing stuff, and then my son Ryan, who called me up in August of 2018 and said, "Dad, I'm at the Piney Branch Safeway. There's a guy taking signatures for the vacant seat on the State Board of Education. Why don't you run?" okay, I had no idea what I knew that the State Board of Education wasn't the same as the Board of Education was before Michelle Rhee destroyed DC Public Schools. And I had no idea who the person was. I live in Ward 4, but I had no idea who the person was who had resigned and left a vacant seat on the State Board of Education, and had no idea of what the State Board did. But I think that there was a message from God, or God's accomplice in heaven, saying, you need to get out of the house and do something. And so I started teaching again at UDC, and I ran. This was all in the same fall, because it was a special election, so it was a month after the general election. So it's 4 years ago. In December of 2018, they had a special election. I had never campaigned for anything, ever. The only thing I'd ever been in charge of, well, I was president of the Faulkner Foundation, which you know about because they got you all those books that you got when the authors came to our schools. And I guess I was elected for that, but I didn't run for it. And so, the whole experience of knocking on doors and talking to people and stuff like that was something I had never thought about. You had just as much experience as I did of going and knocking on doors and trying to convince somebody to vote for me. And especially because we were running against the mayor's candidate and Brandon Todd's candidate in Ward 4. So nobody, the people that knew me, but there were a whole lot of people that didn't know who I was. But we won, and the rest is history. So then I had to run again in 2020 because I had taken over somebody's seat. So I had to run again in the election of 2020, and I still don't understand why, but nobody even ran against me. So I didn't get to debate anybody or have anybody say that I was a bad guy or whatever, because I try not to be a bad guy. But so now I've been on the board for 4 years, and it's been an experience, that's for sure. But it's good work, I think. And one thing I did do was I started collecting books for a thing called Mrs. O'Leary's Books for Friends. She always called all of her students. She was a Head Start teacher. They were all friends. She never called them students or anything. They called each other friends and stuff like that. So we started this book collection. People donated books in the ward, and I deliver them to the schools, to the elementary and middle schools. And we've given over 40,000 books in the last couple of years. It really just started when the pandemic started. I was delivering books to the schools that were food sites, because during the pandemic there were schools that became places where the people that needed food could go and get food, and so that we were delivering books there. And then once we could sort of go around without a mask on, I've been delivering to all the schools.
Wow.
So I don't know what that's the answer to, but that was the answer.
Okay.
I forgot what the question was. Oh, it was how I got into doing it.
Yeah. How'd you get into it? So, wow.
But it was all serendipitous. The fact that Ryan called me, and it just, because if he had called me a couple of months before that, because it was almost on the anniversary. She died in late September of 2017. So it was almost the anniversary of her death when he called me. And if it had been 6 months earlier, I would have dismissed it out of hand. But this whole grieving process, when you lose somebody that you love and are with all the time, is a whole fascinating thing, to be honest with you. Because they give you a couple of guidelines about different steps in grieving and stuff like that, but it's not really in concrete any place. So It's been interesting.
Yeah. So
But
many people don't.
But
Oh,
I didn't start crying while I was
okay.
That would have happened at certain points. Trust me.
Yeah. 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 So many people don't know, you actually fight for people, your students, everyone, like on and off, I say the field or the cameras or whatever you want to call it. I know a lot of times we had people who failed classes, like, and you fought for them to get in St. Mary's College. So can you talk about that in the partnership and getting people, in college and encouraging them who didn't think they could get in or things like that?
The interesting thing about St. Mary's is you've met Layla, but
Yeah.
Layla Wynn graduated from Cardozo in 2001. In the spring of 2001, she called me up and said, "Mr. O'Leary," I wasn't Dr. O'Leary then, and I don't think of myself that way anyway. But she said, "Mister, I just talked to Layla. As a matter of fact, she's doing so well. It's amazing. You should have her on your show."
Okay.
But she called me up and said that she was a member of this elementary school that had been visited by a man when they were graduating from elementary school. And the man promised them if they graduated from high school that they would have a full scholarship to college, which I didn't know about it at all. And at Cardozo, there were about 7 or 8 of our graduating class in 2001 who went to that school. Well, the guy went bankrupt. And she told me that she had been called by a reporter from the Washington Post, and there was going to be an article in the paper about that situation. And I said, "Layla," because I've been in situations like that when there was an article in the Washington Post about somebody who lost a family member or somebody who had bad times or needed some money or whatever like that. And the readers of the Washington Post always stepped up. I said, "Layla, you don't have to worry about going to college because somebody's going to read that article and it's going to take care of you." All right. And I'd had that happen with athletes and other students before. So the next day, Mr. Ballard and I got a call from the president of St. Mary's College, whose name is Margaret O'Brien. They call her Maggie O'Brien, saying that she had read the article in the Washington Post and she would offer the students a full scholarship to St. Mary's, which was unbelievable.
Right.
So we sent down 6 students to St. Mary's that fall. Now, these are all students from inner city Washington, going down only 85 miles away from DC down into the farmland of St. Mary's County in a beautiful college campus, but it's in the woods. Right.
Yeah.
And 5 of those students graduated from St. Mary's in 4 years. And the other one came back and graduated from George Washington University, I think, in the 4 years. And the fact that that those students were able to go down there and thrive as students at St. Mary's opened the door for almost a generation of students from Cardozo to go down there and matriculate and graduate from St. Mary's College. I'm still trying to get the president she retired, and it wasn't really picked up. There were still students there that graduated. You remember Anna Martinez?
Yeah.
Who worked for Miss McCall too. Anna was the last graduate of St. Mary's. She's now a teacher in a DC charter school right up 14th Street, the DCI. And in fact, I don't think she's a teacher. She may be a coordinator there now.
Okay.
But that's what happened. That's how that program began at St. Mary's. I'd love to say that it's still working, but it's not. It's not still working right now. Maybe we should send a video of this conversation to the president of St. Mary's College.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with it.
But that was one. That was a wonderful thing that happened. I didn't really have a lot to do with it, to be honest with you. It was.
Well, you helped promote it.
I did.
I never heard of St. Mary's until you said something about it and the wonderful things.
Mr. Ballard and I both received an honorary doctorate from St. Mary's College because of that program.
That's huge.
But the program wouldn't have been successful if it hadn't been for the students. But it was really something we were talking about in class today. Today, I had the president of the University of the District of Columbia come speak. He spoke to both of my classes, but today was the other class that he spoke to. And he was talking about the same thing about providing an opportunity, which is what UDC does, just like Norfolk State does. All right. It's what the HBCUs do, is they provide an opportunity for students. But St. Mary's College is the public honors college of the University of Maryland system. To get in St. Mary's College, it's a whole lot different than to get into the University of Maryland. And for them to take that chance, but see, that was just that serendipitous thing too. But that's how life is. Right. You just gotta wait on things to happen, and if you don't wait, then you got to get up and make them happen.
Right. I want to know what's been your routine, to strengthen your mind, and you speak so eloquently. Of course, you have your English degree and so forth. Like, what's some of the things that you did to kind of strengthen your mind and kind of who you are today? Since my wife passed, I've always been a reader. All right. I've always been a reader. Even when I was a utter failure as a student in high school, I was reading all the time. I think that's the most important thing. Is you've got to be well read. You've got to read the words of people like Toni Morrison. That top shelf is all Toni Morrison books. And you got to read. You can enter people's worlds through the words and find out so much things. Because I think James Baldwin is our greatest writer. Yeah. And I say that because, and you know how I feel about Toni Morrison, but see, James Baldwin was Toni Morrison's idol. Right.
And if you can read James Baldwin right now, and it's like he just wrote it at 5:00. Everything he says. And I read Toni Morrison. We're about to start Song of Solomon in my class at UDC. And I've never had a class that didn't really enjoy Song of Solomon, even though it's a very difficult book to read. So I think that that's the most important thing. Treat people right. But the way that you really get to be, I don't know how well spoken I am, but I know that if I read a word I didn't understand, then I wrote it down and I looked it up. Then it became my word. All right. And that's what I hope. I know the students at UDC, because I terrorize them every day and I only see them twice a week. And you know how it is. You always got to work. You're always writing. You're always reading. Yeah. But that's the only way you get to be good at something. Just like sports. I've coached all my life, but it's practice. And that's what you have to do. You have to practice all the time to get good at anything.
I have to ask you a question. Of course, we see a lot of people jumping into the teaching profession because they think it's easy. And a lot of them, just do it just because until they find another career path. Do you have any advice for anybody who's teaching right now or who's trying to think whether teaching is for them?
Practice, practice, practice. All right. When I started teaching, I was a student teacher at Garner-Patterson Junior High School, which is at 10th and U Streets Northwest. The way you felt about going to Cardozo, because you were coming out of a private school and you thought it was like filled with gangsters and shootings and stabbings and fights and all that stuff. And that's not Cardozo at all.
Yeah.
All right. Garner-Patterson was at 10th and U Streets Northwest. All right. 4 blocks from the riots. And I got there in 1970. The riots were in 68. All right. And I was teaching old 9th graders. I was teaching 9th graders who were 16 and 17 years old. They had not passed and were taking it again, whatever. And here I was, this young white guy coming in and teaching, not much older than they were, maybe 6 or 7 years older than they were. But I was coaching, and I had a wonderful mentor teacher, Britannia Capers. He was my cooperating teacher, and everything I tried worked. And that was when I was a student teacher. All right. So then I was hired at Garner-Patterson by the principal, Dr. Margaret Labatt, greatest principal in the history of DCPS as far as I'm concerned. And I started teaching like 3 weeks after I graduated from college. And I graduated, after I stopped going to classes. And so each teacher, they gave me I had 5 classes. And each teacher gave up a class. Well, the first thing you have to understand is, what class do I give up if I have to give up a class? Okay. Am I giving up my AP literature? No. So each teacher gave me the class that they wanted to give up. And I was very successful as a teacher in relationships with the students. But when I was at the end of the semester, as I looked at myself as a teacher, I was a total failure. As I had good relationships with the students and everything, that part of it, but I didn't feel as though I had taught them anything because I didn't know what I was doing. The main thing that I work with on the State Board of Education is teacher retention. Okay. DC Public Schools lost 25% of their teaching force last year. At the beginning of this year, there were 25% of the teachers didn't come back. All right. For all kinds of reasons. And so my advice to a young teacher is find a mentor and ask those questions that sign says. If you don't understand something, ask the question. Because if, like in my class, I'll ask my class, they're not, if I ask a class and you were in, you'd have your hand up right away. But a lot of students won't ask the question and they don't know what's going on with the assignment. They don't understand what we're doing, kind of thing. You've got to ask questions. And new teachers have to do that. They have to form alliances with older teachers. And they have to also understand, I think it took me about 5 years. You got me at a good time in my teaching life because I knew what I was doing. All right. But it takes about 5 years to understand what you're doing. All right. You've got to come in with all this enthusiasm about probably not out of education classes in college. I didn't learn anything from an education class in college. It didn't prepare. Most of the teachers come and they come from these schools that had, minority black students, and they go into a classroom with this fit like Cardozo, 50% Latino and 50% African American, and even if they're the same race as those people, they don't understand the economic problems that what students bring to classrooms. Because that's what teaching's about. I think the greatest. I don't watch TV since my wife passed. The only thing I watch is sports, except for one show. You know what that show is? Abbott Elementary. Have you heard about that show?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Oh, Catherine, run, don't walk.
Run, don't walk. Okay.
Yep, and watch it in sequence. Watch the first season before you. It's the second season now. Okay. I'll watch it a couple of days after it comes on. But it's like education in a inner city, especially inner city education in a microcosm. And it's only a half an hour show. Okay. And that's with commercials. So it's about 20 minutes of text of the actual show itself. But it's so spot on about every problem that we have and I'll talk about it offline with you about that. Okay. But that's it. You gotta realize that and if you're in the job just to get it on your resume, then get out of it. That's my advice. UDC has an education department preparing teachers they have a free for DC residents. You can apply for the master's program, 1 year master's program paid for. Wow. In education. And it's available right now on your website at UDC. So that would be the first thing I would mention to any new teachers is use UDC.
Mm. Now, I want to say something to you, of course. I remember, in class, you would say, especially when we were writing the essays, to think as if you're that person reading that essay at 5 p.m., you're ready to get off, you're hungry, you're starving. I mean, just that whole philosophy of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but to make yourself stand out has helped me get proposals, contracts, the awards, scholarships. Like, can you talk about that philosophy that people get into when they're writing?
Well, that was talking about grading AP essays. Remember, because this was the first year I've retired from that. This year was the first year. Yeah. I was going to do it for the last time this year, mm-hmm. and I got COVID right before I was going to Salt Lake City for a week, and I got COVID, and I couldn't go. But that quote, if that's a quote, had to do with the fact that you gotta write your essay, because we spent a week reading AP essays. All right, let's talk about literature. So I would read like 200 essays a day from all over the world, and I was dogged in making sure that I was ready. So I learned how to not be tired until I got home and passed out. I got back to the hotel and passed out that night, especially the first couple of days. After 7 o'clock, I was asleep and slept all night long. But the thing about it is that anything that you are putting that's going to represent you, like you said, a contract or a resume or some kind of a letter you have to write in order to get a promotion, you need to also have someone else read it. Okay, you can't do that on the AP essay. But the thing that we tried to prepare the students for on the AP essay was to make sure you know what your prompt says and answer whatever they're asking for first. When a student is writing an essay to get into college and stuff, my opinion about that had to be, write about something that is going to stick out when the college counselors are reading, because they're sitting down doing an AP reading kind of thing anyway. with the essays. And if you're talking about, well, I was a great student and I did this, that, everybody's writing the same essay.
Yep.
If you were talking about, like you as an entrepreneur, the business you began when you started in the 11th grade and started your own business kind of thing, that sticks out. So you have to sell yourself, and they can't look at you. They can't hear your voice. Yeah. So, the only way you can communicate is through your writing. And that's what I tell my students right now. That's why, because we just finished that indoctrination period with my class at UDC. We've just finished really the whole first month of my classes, and they've gotten a lot of papers back with a lot of red marks on them and stuff like that. But now the papers they're turning in, they're going to be graded as is. They're not going to get a chance to edit them and things like that. So I think one of the pieces of advice is to have someone else read it. Because, I told them yesterday, every single message that I send to my students, announce all the stuff on Blackboard. We do everything on Blackboard. Everything that I send, I'm always correcting I'm correcting every word all the time because I'm not a good typist, and I know what I think I'm putting down, but I'll misspell words or whatever. So you should have someone else look at it and say to you, be an honest editor, and say to you, is this exactly what you mean, or what do you mean by this? That's the best advice I give someone who's submitting something in writing.
Okay. Last 3 questions. Let's talk about the AP reunion. What was the inspiration behind that? And can you give people a little insight of the famous AP reunion that happens every year?
That began with the people from St. Mary's. That when I'm pretty sure it was the Christmas after they started their first year at St. Mary's. So it was the first time they'd been home since they started at St. Mary's, let's say in August of 2001. And I think our first AP reunion was December of 2001. And I just invited the class of 2000. It wasn't just St. Mary's students, but they were sort of the inspiration for it, because President O'Brien came a couple of times. She was at the last AP reunion, as a matter of fact. The one we did virtually in last December. Yeah. She came back and saw some of her graduates who are now have master's degrees or PhDs or lawyers or whatever, all over the place. But it was just an idea, why don't we try this kind of thing? Because we had it at the Sumner School, which is downtown across from the National Geographic building. It's an old school building, but now it's a museum. And we had it was a sit-down dinner with, in an auditorium. It was nice, really nice, classy, a nice classy occasion. People got dressed up and stuff like that. So we're looking forward to this year's reunion. The co-coordinator of the reunion is right on the other side. She's right over here. There she is right there. So we're going to try to figure out when we want to do the reunion this year, because we're going to do it live at Cardozo. And it'll be the first time we've done it at Cardozo since the pandemic. Wow. So we're looking for a big crowd to come. Wow. But it's a wonderful time. People get to see their friends and stuff like that. And it's a reunion. It's really, people get to tell their stories. That's the highlight of it for me, is when people stand, and people come that didn't graduate from college. They talk about what they're doing in life. And that's what it's about. Their stories are always the highlight of the reunion. Your story is always a highlight of the reunion.
Oh, thanks.
Because you got a great story.
Yeah. I'm pretty chill like you. So out of all the amazing things you've done, what's one of the most things you're proud of?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is I have 5 children that are very successful and have gone through things and stuff like that, but are still going through things. Your children don't stop being your children, because my oldest child will be 53 in April, and my oldest son just turned 52, and Ryan is 39, and Olivia's 28, and she'll almost be 30 now, for God's sakes. And Alex, my youngest, is 24. He'll be 25 in February. But I think I'm probably even prouder of. I'm old now. I'll be 78 next month. Of being the best husband I could be with my wife, Myra. She was the love of my life, and she put up with a lot of things, not bad things, but I tried my best to do that, to be the best husband I could be. All the other stuff, professionally and athletically and whatever, I'm proud of. But I think that I'm proud that I'm Ruth and Jerry's son, and that I've lived up to what they wanted me to be, I guess.
Wow. So what's next for you? Are you writing a book? What I know people are like, what do you have next up your sleeve? Because I know you have something.
Well, I'm not going to run again, I don't think, because I'll be 80. I'll be 80 in 2024. Mm-hmm. And somebody else can do it. Like when you move back into Ward 4, then you could be the representative on the State Board of Education. It's just a thought. Right. I love teaching. I love UDC. I'm a Firebird. I'm a clerk and a Firebird, in that order. And I'm not. I know what's not in my. I have no desire to go back teaching in high school or anything. I love teaching at UDC. I don't know how long that'll. I mean, like I said, I'm not. There's probably going to come a time where people say, "Well, we have an age limit or something, or something like that." I don't have any real desires. I want to go to Ireland. I haven't ever been to Ireland. I have probably a parallel desire to go to Vietnam and see what Vietnam looks like. I got there in 1964. And when I got to Vietnam, I was in Saigon, right outside of Saigon, which is now Ho Chi Minh City, but it was the capital. It was called the Paris of the Orient. It was a beautiful city. I'd like to go back and see what it looks like. But I don't really have anything that like a bucket list. I don't really have. I guess Ireland and Vietnam are on a bucket list. I won't. If I pass away tomorrow, it won't be like, oh damn, I didn't make it to Ireland or Vietnam. I didn't fulfill my life. I don't think I have. I mean, the book thing is something that I keep getting bugged about. That may happen. I started a novel one time. I got about 2 pages in. It was about Vietnam. But I haven't. I write poetry, but not much. Not as much as. I guess if I wasn't doing anything, I could write some more poetry. I don't know who'd read my book. But a book about me, I don't know. I know I wouldn't. I'd be bored.
Oh no.
But I don't. There really isn't any. If I were 20 years younger now, and we were having this conversation, and I was where I am right now, but I was 20 years younger, which I could have been. I might have thought about political things. I mean, but I'm not interested in that at all. When I was a kid, I wanted to be president of the United States. That was something I thought about, but that was when Kennedy was president of the United States. And Kennedy was, my father and President Kennedy were friends.
Oh, wow.
So, that was something that was, and that was just stupid Frazier at the time, because there was no reason. I wasn't even like secretary of the school patrol or anything like that. I didn't have any political anything. I was interested in history and politics and stuff like that. That was my minor in college at American University. Was political science. But I like to read, and I still read a lot. And I love to teach. So, if when I'm 85, I'm still teaching, that'll be cool. If I can still walk and stuff.
Oh.
I didn't really enjoy teaching virtually.
Oh, okay.
I like to be in the room interact with the class at UDC. I taught 1 year at UDC online, but my class is virtual, and we decided today that we were going to be that it'll be the student's choice to either wear a mask or not.
Okay.
Which was, I'm glad, because I besides being deaf, it's hard to
Peanuts, right? Like,
yeah. And I really don't, I don't wear my hearing aids, which I should.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, as we wrap up, someone just asked.
Oh my goodness!
Do you have any marriage advice? Someone just asked for marriage advice.
Marriage advice.
Yes. Someone just asked that. I'm trying to close you up. I'm like, question popping up.
Really? Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's good. I didn't know. So, hello, y'all. I don't know who's watching this. My advice, it used to be the advice that I would give to young men, just about a relationship with a female. All right. So I know that's not like, but it goes for everybody. Here's the deal. The first thing is if you're choosing a partner, and it has nothing to do with gender, if you're choosing a partner, there are only two qualifications as far as I'm concerned. The first one is make sure they're smarter than you are. And the second one is, do you still love that person when you wake up in the morning and they haven't brushed their teeth and their hair's a mess or whatever? If you still are in love with that person in that phase of your life, then that's the person you want to be with for the rest of your life. That's my marriage. That's it. It's that simple. That's it. That's what I tell my children. It hasn't got anything to do with money. It hasn't got anything to do with prestige or power or anything like that. It really has to do with someone that you can laugh with and someone you can talk to and someone you trust completely. Okay. The rest of that stuff is gravy. Now, if it's a beautiful person, which I was lucky enough to marry a woman smarter than I was, who was beautiful all the time, and I love being with, and that's heaven on earth. Okay. I didn't expect.
Thank you for your time today. I truly appreciate it. It's long overdue. My favorite teacher in the world, my mentor. I mean, just the idea that there's no limit and there's no age as far as how big your dreams can be. So that's Dr. Frazier O'Leary. I'm glad you guys got plenty of wisdom, knowledge, and we're not sharing him with you guys, so you guys can't have him. He's our favorite, being thousands of Cardozo clerks around the world. Truly amazing, truly a blessing. Just completely, this is just amazing today. So thank you again.
Sure. Thank you. Bye,
Right.
y'all.
See you.